Hello, it's me again, Nick Bellinger, in the shed, as usual, under lots of lights, because let me tell you, it's very peculiar outside today. There is a brownish sky outside the shed, and it's covering everything in like a brown dust in Horsham in Sussex today, which is very peculiar, and I'm a little bit scared. But anyway, I digress. Here we are with the Wellbeing Show as usual, but today is a very special day because I have gone outside of Sanofi again. I know, sometimes I do that, pretty rarely, but today is a wonderful exception because I'm here with great friend Amantha King. Hello, Amantha, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine, Nick. Thank you. It's really nice to be here. Thanks ever so much for having me.
No worries. Well, for those of you that weren't lucky enough to join you on a webinar that we had from you at Sanofi, I think last year, could you remind us what it is you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I've got two things that I do mostly. The first one is I'm a strengths performance coach. So I work with amazing executives for them to reveal the best version of themselves. And actually, whilst doing that, I forged my second role, which is actually a menopause coach. So I come into businesses and advise around menopause, and I coach women one-to-one in terms of transitioning through the menopause, all three stages. So yeah, both of those jobs combine beautifully, as you can imagine.
I can well imagine, yes. And I in fact did a show once on the menopause, believe it or not. And I think I once shared with you that the person I had on, a lady that used to work at Sanofi and went on to write books and do webinars on menopause as well. So it's a subject that I still probably know this much about. But I do know one stage is perimenopause. That's as far as probably my knowledge goes, and I'm prepared to learn more about that. But congratulations on your divergence of your career.
Thank you. Yeah, it's huge. It's hugely exciting, and it's doubly exciting because I'm still going through it myself. So to be able to add value, raise that awareness, create meaningful action around it, and keep women in business is fundamentally what I'm about. So yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
I was about to say, and we have that in common, which would infer that I'm going through the menopause. But what I mean to say is more that the reason I do this show is because, of me trying to sort my own well-being out is kind of one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the topic. So I think that to be really at one with the topic, you need to be going through it in some way. I think when you see, for example, when you see people from a very privileged kind of upbringing, if you will, talking about diversity and inclusion, it can be you feel a little detached when they're having that conversation. I'm sure that many of them do a wonderful job of it, but however, I always kind of feel a little bit like, really? You're talking about this stuff? And likewise, I'm quite pleased that when I talk about the things that I talk about, I can talk from experience, and it sounds like that's something that you do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully people looking, we make lots of assumptions about menopausal women, and I'm here to change the narrative on that. I feel more glamorous than I've ever felt in my entire life. I'm 50 now. I've got at best another 33 years of life to live on this thing called planet Earth. I'm actually going to make the absolute most of it. And I want to change the narrative so that women understand menopause isn't something you have to endure. It's something that can be celebrated, and in some cultures around the world, it's the most revered time for a woman. So you know what, we're stronger together. So the more of us that can be aware and help one another, it's fantastic. And we need more women. When we talk about diversity and inclusion, we need more women to be in those upper ranks in business, in society. So yeah, bring it on. That's what I say.
Bring it on. And what a lovely service that you offer. And I wonder if you might get a few phone calls from my colleagues at Sanofi, which would be lovely, of course. But yeah, the thing that actually joined us together, we joined together for many things. I think we first met when we were looking at things kind of locally around where Sanofi is based in the UK, in Reading, and their Chamber of Commerce and all this sort of stuff. I think that's how we met. But we've gone on to be kind of fans of each other's kind of work on social networks and other such. And one that really caught my eye, because it was something that I was discussing with lots of people in Sanofi at the time, was a video that you posted on your wonderful, rich, contented LinkedIn. People need to go there immediately, by the way. Is that you did a video all about pie, which So people are going to be very confused at this point. They're going to think, am I going to go down a bake-off route or a maths route? But no, I'm not. In fact, PI is something that we'll talk about in a minute, because it's an acronym that's related to people who aren't feeling like they're getting noticed within an organization. And it really spoke to me at that moment, because I was having some great conversations with some brilliant women around Sanofi, particularly in like our high potential kind of talent kind of places in our business, who are like saying, look, I'm doing all these great things, but the jobs just aren't coming, and the opportunities just aren't there, and I don't understand, what is it that I'm not doing correctly. And this video just appeared by magic in my telephone. So tell me a little bit about Amantha's pie.
Okay, so it's so fascinating. We talk about the gender differences, don't we? And this is great because you're a guy, I'm a girl, and in the broadest sense, we can bounce this idea off one another. But basically, it goes something like this. It came from studies that Hewlett Packard had done. The guy whose name I can't remember, John Hammett. Okay. He actually was a Pillsbury executive, and he came across this principle of pie, which is largely a male characteristic, and cake, which is largely a female characteristic. So I'll explain pie to you first, shall I? So pie stands for performance, P for performance, I for image, E for exposure. Now, if you and I both went for a job, Nick, okay, chances are you in a male-dominated environment would go, do you know what? I think I've got 60% of what's required here. I'm going to put my name in the hat. Right. Women, on the other hand, generalizing, tend to go, unless I've got 100% of all this rocking, I'm not putting my name in the hat at all.
Okay.
And what we then have as another layer, which is really interesting, is let's say you are an executive in a business and you have been mentored or coached by a man. You're going to be coached through the lens of pie, performance, image, exposure. Whereas women will be cake. So let's tell you about the percentages attached to pie, shall we? So performance, you might be forgiven for thinking, well, that's about, how you do your job. It's not.
Right.
It's about the outcomes that you are seen to deliver.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's that whole, are you hitting your outcomes? Are you delivering what is expected of your role? Do you know what percentage that accounts for in our pie?
I'm guessing it's lower by the way you're speaking than I'm going to expect, because I would expect that outcomes would be massive, but I'm guessing it's maybe not in the pie.
No, it's only 10%.
Oh my God.
So can you see why guys turn up and go, well, I'm all in for this job application, because if only 10% of it is about, well, outcomes, yes, I can talk my way through all the outcomes I've achieved.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so that's the bit. So that's really subtle, isn't it? Okay, really subtle difference in how we might think. The next bit is image. And again, this isn't what brand of shirts you wear and have you got a crease down the front of your trousers? It's not that type of image. This is your image as a leader, as a senior person. And again, this is about your cultural presence.
Okay.
Do people recognize you as a leader attached to those amazing outcomes?
Okay.
So, it's about how people talk about you. Do they talk about you in that positive way? Are people observing your behaviors that would suggest that you have the right image? So in other words, your image actually is a reflection of how you're seen as a leader.
Okay.
Now, again, so we've already got 10%. This might shock you. This is 30%.
Okay.
Okay. So we've accrued 40%. Which means, quick maths. I did it beforehand. I've written it down. So this actually means exposure is a whopping 60%. Okay, so let's just explore a bit of exposure. This is about those jobs that have been given to you and those assignments. It's about how have you done and how has that been exposed to levels higher than yours? Who's aware of it? Okay, so getting the right assignments, getting the right outcomes is all very well, but unless anybody, doesn't get to hear about it, You're wasting that whopping 60%, which is why you'll know yourself when you hear people going for jobs. We can usually predict who's going to go for those jobs.
Yeah, same old
people. But what it's not is the people who've been mentored in a cake capacity.
Okay.
So the first thing to remember is Pi is largely a male-dominated mentoring coaching model. But if your boss isn't male, or your coach isn't male, you're probably going to have the cake version. So let's get into the cake version, shall we? Okay. And just for those obvious spellers out there, cake is spelt with a K, but in this example, the K doesn't mean the same word. I'll explain. So we start with the first C in cake is for confidence.
Okay.
So this will probably explain a lot in terms of what you first described, Nick, in terms of, women saying, well, I'm doing all the right things, but I'm not getting that exposure. So confidence is about doing something that maybe you haven't done before. And a woman, like I said, will not go for an experience or another promotion if she isn't confident that she can do it.
Sure. Okay.
So this is where it starts to become a bit tricky. I think it was Madeleine Albright, former secretary in America. She was known to have said, people sometimes ask me how I want to be remembered, and she said she wanted to be remembered as championing older women.
Oh, nice.
Giving them the confidence. So that's quite an unusual way to describe yourself, isn't it? But that's how she saw her role, about giving other people the confidence. So that's the first thing. The A in our cake is aptitude and attitude.
Okay.
So if you have a mentor that can help point out to you what are your areas for development, what's your attitude got to be like? Can we cultivate that more? Again, unless you feel that you've got that top notch, you're not going to be putting yourself forward.
Okay.
So we're looking for that validation, if you like. Women tend to look for that validation that you're the right person. Yeah, you go forward. You'll definitely get it.
Yeah.
Unless we've got someone being our wing person in that way, and we actually believe it.
Never going to happen. No.
Never going to happen. So we need a mentor who's going to discuss work-life balance, challenges for women, help us overcome some of that imposter syndrome we might be walking around with.
Yeah.
And to start really making a better job of our image, translating it more into the Pi model, if you like.
Yeah.
The image and exposure. So now we're on to our K, which is not the K you think it is. It's connection.
Okay. No worries. But
so it's about being connected to the connection to resources. Okay. So it's about who's championing putting you in front of the right people. Who's saying, Amantha, you've got to come along to this meeting because I want you to see how it rolls in this environment. I want you to get that exposure to understanding who the key players are, who's controlling the room. So again, all that boost of confidence. So it's about who are we connecting with. So connection is really important in organizations, not just in your direct circle of influence, but much further afield. Metaphorically, are we only in the middle floor of our building, or do we ever go to the top or the bottom of the floor? Because that's what's really going to, again, increase your exposure and your image. And then the last one is encouragement.
Nice.
Something that our male counterparts don't seem to need as much as we do, because remember, they only needed 60% to apply for a job. So they've already got bucket loads of encouragement going on, I would imagine, either internally or possibly externally. So this is about women need to blaze those trails in companies and organizations. So you need to have people who are supporting you, men and women, who are prepared to put themselves out and saying, look, we know how important it is to get women in there, so let's expose them to some of what's going on in a safe way. Now already, I think most guys listening to cake would go, why would you have cake when you can have more pie than you can cope with?
Indeed.
So here's the thing. I think we need to be very sparing with cake, but go all in with pie. And actually, anyone who's listening to this who has women in their team, It is about actually exposing them to the pie process.
Okay.
Even if they weren't aware of it up until now, you know, but a little bit of cake is good also across the gender gap, that gender divide, because actually we can then be sensitive to one another, because it is important to encourage one another, whether you're a man or a woman.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. My kind of summary feels that cake is a bit more passive, and whereas pie is a bit more active. It feels like you don't ask permission for pie.
No, I love that.
You take the pie.
Yes. Yes.
It's like it's cooling on the windowsill and you're just going to take it.
Yeah, exactly. Snatch it back. And when I have coached executives, I've brought this to their attention, and it's worked brilliantly, because everyone's going to cross over and learn the other way, you know. So lots of my male executive clients will go, okay, right, didn't realize that I was focusing quite so much on the image and exposure, but now we've discussed my behavior, I can see that. How does that look to other people? And you know, you're going to have those mavericks in organizations where people just go, oh my goodness, God, I hope he doesn't get it. You know, I can say those things because I'm in that privileged position. But then there'll be other people who go, gosh, I so wanted that person to get it because they would have been brilliant in that role. So I think if we can just sensitize men and women to the pie and cake formula, and to actually, as a group, agree we need to mentor and coach both groups in a pie way, then it's fair.
Yeah, I completely agree, because I think, funnily enough, I was one of my I suppose influencers was actually a woman that taught me pie-ish behavior, strangely, because I was at a point in my career, and so many people are, and there's nothing wrong with being earlier in your career, but earlier in your career, you think the formula is, I do really good work, and a fairy godmother or father comes along and says, you've done good work, have all the money and all the jobs. Okay. And I think I spent probably most of my 20s and a bit of my 30s waiting for the fairy to arrive, right? And it never happened. And so this boss came into my life and kind of went, yeah, you are doing great work. How many people know? And I'm like, well, as long as you do, you make sure I get a bonus and a pay rise. And she goes, maybe, but I'm not the person that's going to give you the next job, the next project, the next opportunity. You need to make sure that everyone in the company knows how great you are. And I was kind of like, well, yeah, but that would be embarrassing. They're going to shoot me down. And anyway, and now people watching this will now find that whole concept hilarious, because I'm probably the most exposed person at Sanofi, because I have a weekly show that goes out every Monday, and in between that I will put other Yammer posts, I will be doing webinars and everything else, because I realize how important it is to get that exposure. Even if, dare I say it, I'd say I was less than 60% qualified to have a show every Monday about wellbeing. And that just goes to show, doesn't it, that I've been pied.
You've been pied in the face. If you're a kid in the 70s, it was very popular to be pied in the face, wasn't it? With one of those fine foam pies. Brilliant. That's brilliant. And you know, the thing is, it's about seeing yourself as your own unique brand. You are your own unique brand within the brand of Sanofi, for example. And therefore, you're actually doing yourself a disservice by not advertising your brand. And it's not egotistical, it's not big-headed, it's not arrogant. Actually, what it is it's saying, I'm confident about what I do. And one of the other things that helps people get to this point is actually knowing what your strengths are, which is the other part of my coaching, which is, you know, if you knew categorically what your 24 strengths were, and yes, you've each got 24, that would help you formulate, okay, how does that show up in my performance? How do those strengths show up in my image and my exposure? You know, what's maybe not helping me? What can I do differently? And so I think pie is literally just the tip of the surface, really, what we're talking about, what's really beneath that. And actually, there'll be a whole host of reasons why people lack confidence, or they're not keen to put themselves out there. But actually, everything is easy to understand when you know what the systems are. And so I would say if you have a coaching opportunity, great, fully explore what we've talked about today. If you haven't, what can you do to start getting some coaching or mentoring in Sanofi? Because that's brilliant. And that doesn't need to be something, a formal arrangement. That can be like casual, meet over a coffee once or twice a month, you know, and it can be a very fortuitous two-way process. And so I say to people, strike up those conversations. Ask, if you see someone doing what you'd aspire to do, ask them how they do it.
Yeah, and it really is that simple. And I had that very conversation in some management training I was giving the other day. So someone did some of the old Nick behavior. They said, I've been waiting for a coach and a mentor since I started. And I'm like, well, how long have you worked here? And I'm like, oh, 5 years. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, so have you walked up to someone and said, I admire you, I would love for you to be my mentor? No, I'm waiting to be part of the scheme. And I'm like, yeah, there might be schemes, but the easiest way is to tap someone on the shoulder. and
Absolutely.
They were very surprised that it was that simple.
Yeah, and I suppose it's that another sort of top tip I would give is actually just to reflect on yourself, reflect on how you approach other people, because even if you're not ready to do it yourself, you can certainly encourage others. But you know what, I agree with you. There's, you know, it is such a positive thing to go, okay, I'm going all in. I'm going to ask for it. What's the worst that can happen?
Yeah. Well, and someone very high up in Sanofi said that if anyone refuses you one conversation of this type, they shouldn't be working at Sanofi. What a lovely kind of open door that is. And funnily enough, the day I heard that, there was someone that I was scared to kind of go and befriend, and I sent them a little virtual message, you know, a VM or whatever, saying, can I talk to you? I think you do the job that I really want. And they're like, sure, let's have a coffee today. And I was like, brilliant. And for all the introverts, you know, out there listening, right, it really is that simple. I know that the idea for many of you will be talk to another human. But these, you know, you just use 20 seconds of courage to borrow a terrible idea from a pretty bad film. Just use a little bit of courage up and just send that one message, and it could change everything.
Yeah, absolutely, because it just makes the other people feel good as well. And actually, there's something quite nice about asking someone, how do you get to be so good at what you do? Because it actually encourages the other person to think, possibly in ways that they haven't thought about it before, because they're just so used to just cracking on and doing it. So, you know, you attract like-minded people when you sort of step into these conversations. And I think, you know, if the pandemic's taught us anything, it's more about, you know, that's how you and I met, Nick, you know, just having a conversation and reaching out and just going, well, I'm just curious to know more about what you do. And that's if you can't think of an opening line, use that one possibly. I'm just curious to know about what it is you do and how you do it.
I wish I knew how I managed to foster this, because I feel like you were talking at one of the Chamber of Commerce things, and I think I slid into your DMs and just went, "Oh my God, you're amazing!" And I think that's exactly
that's exactly it. That's it. And I mean, can we have a conversation at some stage? And that's the beginning of what has become a really fantastic friendship. And you know, like you said earlier, championing one another. I think it's brilliant. Really great things happen.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. You have sparked another question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Which is, it's kind of for the person on the other side, right? So we've now done a lovely piece of work to give them a model for how they're going to maybe sell themselves, how they're going to pie up, and if you're over pieing, whether or not you consider cake. but my question then, and it's something that I struggle with myself, is that when you're the person that is being approached to be a mentor, and you feel woefully inadequate to do so, and you get someone slides into your DMs and says, I think you're amazing, I really want, you know, you to mentor me. So far, let me tell you, I've managed that question appallingly. And it's amazing that I've ever had mentees, and I've had very, very many, which I'm so grateful for, and I'm still not quite sure why. But anyway, people do kindly come forward. And usually my first response is to try to convince them that they're wrong to ask.
Oh, okay, right.
which is a really bad idea. There was this wonderful moment. We have a system at our place called Workday, which is like a HR system, and it has this functionality inside it which will recommend a mentor to you, which is very clever, right? It's part of our new careers hub. If you put in kind of what you're looking to develop, what kind of role you want, the supercomputer will go, I match you to Amantha, right? And so I got someone approached me via that. And so of course my response was, well, the computer's broken.
Oh my goodness.
What could I possibly do to help someone as amazing as you? And that fortunately the person had the strength of character to say, no, I've looked you up, and I think you could really help me. And we've gone on to have a wonderful, fruitful kind of mentor-mentee relationship. So in my shoes, what's a dignified way to accept that approach?
Okay, so I would almost remove yourself from that equation and just make it about the behaviors that person is seeing. So it's not about you personally. What they're looking for is to be able to learn, adopt, extend some behaviors that you are good at. So it's not you, it's your behaviors. And that's what we always say, isn't it? It's not the person, it's the behaviors. If we see people acting out or doing brilliantly, actually it's the behaviors that we're noticing first and foremost. That's the first level. But if we got beneath that, what we'd also be noticing is the values. And actually, my friend, that is what people are noticing about you. There's a much, much deeper connection that goes way beyond a computer algorithm, because remember, they don't have to accept you as their mentor. Okay, so there is a choice on their part. So we've got to allow them to feel like they have actually made the right choice. It isn't actually you making the choice, it's them making the choice. And it comes back to something much, much more intrinsic to the human race, and that is values. I mean, if people understand that we go around with a radar transmitting all the time, and for me, mine's emitting fun, integrity, honesty, compassion, kindness. That's what I emit to people, and that's the type of people I attract. How does that show up? That shows up as me being a strengths performance coach. It shows up as me being a compassionate menopause coach, someone who's really driven to create change. Well, if you hear the last three things that I said, those are all behaviors which extend from those fabulous values. So really, people are buying into a shared set of values with you, Nick. So I would say, great, we got some work to do. What is it, the behaviors that you want to work on, and what connects those behaviors to your values? What are the values that are most important to you? Because let's just focus our conversations on that. So it's like you are meeting around a pie, if you want, that's made up of values and behaviors. One directly influences the other. So I don't know, does that help take the pressure off of you?
Yeah, because if you make it about people, perhaps for example, that they're seeing my pie, if you will, and that's what attracts people to me. So they're kind of like, hang on, he's everywhere. Why is he everywhere? And it might be that, I want to learn about how to get the exposure, how to become more connected, that sort of stuff. And then that isn't about me. There's just the things that they see that they can hang on to. That's fun. That makes it a lot easier to accept. Well, not even see it as a compliment, but to see it more as more kind of practical, functional kind of components. I completely understand.
Yeah, it's very transactional. People want the values that they align with, which is why you surround yourself with certain friends, you have certain hobbies that resonate your values. Everything that you do is wrapped up in your values, whether you know it or not. And when you dislike things, when you can't align yourself with things, that's because you are being asked to behave in a way that contravenes your values. So get clear on your values. That boosts your confidence. Double it up with knowing what your strengths are, and you are ready to make the mother of all pies, I think.
Happy days. So I really think we need to finish at that point. What a lovely way to end our lovely conversation today. But thank you so much for sharing your pie and your cake with us today. and I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. See you soon. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.